A very warm greeting to everyone joining us today here at Zoom, and also to those following us live. Yes, you can follow this exciting conversation on Contrast's YouTube channel as well. So I'll begin by introducing myself. I am Amisha Adhikari. I'm a lawyer based in Nepal, and I'm currently working as a program officer at Advocate. Absolute privilege to welcome you all to this regional webinar organized by A3T. Asia Alliance Against Torture, also known as A3T, is a collaborative movement of CSOs working against torture in Asia. A3T also provides a platform for the CSOs to share experiences, and they can come up with advocacy strategies to make the countries in Asia free from torture. And in regards to the regional webinar, like the one we are having today, it is a part of series of webinars that are being held from 18th June until 20th June 2022. And the main purpose of this 11th series webinar is to commemorate the Torture Awareness Month. And as a part of this webinar series, today we are discussing the UPR recommendation and its implementation for the protection and promotion of human rights. And I feel that the topic is very interesting in a sense that we will be talking about the Universal Periodic Review, which is one of the only global human rights mechanism that currently exists to scrutinize the human rights records of the United Nations member states. And as a undergo this procedure with their human rights record being examined every 5 years. And in this process, the state which are under review, they receives recommendation from other states that they either support, meaning that they accept, or they merely note. So in this webinar, we will be talking more about the recommendations in the previous UPR cycles supported and noted by our countries, relating particularly to prevention of torture, impunity, and we'll also be discussing how they have been implemented and the challenges that have arisen in the implementation. And in this conversation, I'm joined by an esteemed panel of speakers who will be sharing with us their expertise and experiences on the issue, as they are closely monitoring and participating in the UPR today. As a speaker, Nadine Sherani from A3T Secretariat, who is also an international advocacy officer from Contrast Indonesia. And the main activity of Contrast is geared toward supporting victims of human rights violations. Also, we have Anton Muhazir from SafeNet, which is also based in Indonesia, which is a regional rights organization founded with a mission to defend digital rights in Southeast Asia, and also a vision of digital space that upholds human rights values for all people. We're very pleased to have you both. And before we start with the webinar, I want to quickly share the modality of our webinar. Our speakers will have 15 minutes each for their presentation, and then we will open the floor for question and answers. I would want to request the participants, if you have any questions during the session, to please put them down in the chat box. So starting off, I'm sorry. So I would want to request Nadine to share her thoughts and insights on the UPR recommendation relating to prevention of torture that Indonesia has supported or noted over the years. So over to you, Nadine.
Okay, so hi participants from the Zoom account and as well as from also live from Contrast's YouTube channel. Okay, so maybe for some of you have been knowing me from the past or previous um, webinars. Let me reintroduce myself again. Hello, my name is Nadine Sherani. Actually sitting here at the moment as the A3T Secretariat. But not only that, I am also undergoing as the International Advocacy Officer from Contrast Indonesia. Okay, well, without further ado, I think I would just present my screen now. Okay, so I will be talking a lot about the UPR recommendations and as well as the implementations. And just based on the title itself in the screen, how has it been so far? Has it been implemented well? Has it been only partially implemented, or have not been implemented at all, and etc. But I think I would like to present first the basics regarding UPR, which have been actually explained by Amisha. Thank you so much, Amisha, for your brief explanation regarding UPR. Maybe just a bit before my presentation here. So what is actually UPR? Because it has been circling around our media, our news platforms, even from our social media for those who have followed several CSOs or maybe the OHCHR Instagram account or Twitter account. It has been said a lot, UPR, under review for UPR, further meetings or proceedings for UPR, etc. So maybe I would like to continue a bit what has been explained earlier by Amisha. So UPR here, it stands for the Universal Periodic Review. That's the whole purpose. And it is actually a very well explained here by only the three words itself here, is that it is simply a series of human rights report by all UN members, where they send their human rights reports to the UN, and later on, they will receive recommendations from one to another based on the reports received, sent by them and received by other civil society organizations or other entities to the UN. That's the whole purpose of the UPR. So tons of themes have been put on the table for this UPR. We have seen a lot of themes such as torture and ill treatments, and then rights to dissent, rights to justice, rights to education even, rights to health, freedom of press, and etc. We have also tons of themes regarding children, women, and also human rights defenders. So any kind of recommendations will be given by other UN bodies or UN member states during the session. What will be good enough or what should be done better for this specific country that has been giving the human rights report. And mentioned also by Amisha, this is done 5 years per cycle. And the first one, if I'm not mistaken, it was done in 2006. So this, the last one was cycle 3 at 2017 until 2021. So the cycle here at the moment is still under review, where we have been CSOs and also member states have been sending reports to the UN body, and now it is under review what should be the proper recommendations for these member states that have been sending their reports. So I'm hoping that my brief explanation will be good enough for other participants to understand more. Okay, now next we have what are actually the recommendations, or maybe just an example of the recommendations given. So here I have one of the recommendations stated to Indonesia from IREC, we can see here, for the theme prohibition of torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. Here, it is stated by IREC in 2017 that Indonesia needs to continue the efforts of fighting against torture. So there are also other recommendations by countries to ratify, for example, the optional protocol of the Convention Against Torture, and then other themes that is supposed to be upholding or increasing the condition of human rights in Indonesia. This picture here is just one of the examples of the recommendations. Next. Now, the question remains here, how has it been so far? But before I go too far in this, I would probably want to take several conditions, take several cases of conditions. What has been recommended actually in a region scope. So there has been several recommendations given by each member states across Asia. But as a whole, there are tons of them. But in average here, I noted, and I really noticed here that the recommendations from the third cycle mainly discuss about how the states should end torture and end the end of the chain of impunity. These two I saw in the recommendations between the states of Asia have been recommended by several states. And there have been also been recommendations for to stop the police brutality that has been happening, to which police officers and other security officers have been implementing torture towards the civil society, whether it is personal or it is in group or as in CSOs. And then also there has been a tons of cases which has been recommended to the states of Asia to end extrajudicial killings and also to implement and create an extrajudicial killing and torture independent investigation, which mainly also mean by ratifying and also follow the Istanbul Protocol. And then we have also gender-based violence and etc. What I saw here is that in the past few years, which is in the 2017 until 2021, there has been tons of torture cases, and these has been sought out by also the UN bodies and also the UN member states to end this series of cases that I have been mentioning before. But not only been mentioning to end torture, to end extrajudicial killing, to this and that, regarding a certain case or issue, or maybe a trend, sadly, we call it a trend. But some also recommend that several states in Asia should be also advancing the ratification of the optional protocol or just the CAT itself, because we see here that even though there have been several states that have been ratifying the CAT, but some of them have not. Even a lot of states in Asia, like for example India, and several states also have been ratifying the optional protocol, which means that they have been also been ratifying the UNCAT, but there has not been a follow-up or maybe a more systematic mechanism of a follow-up to prevent torture, which is later on called the National Preventive Mechanism or the NPMs. So these are the several recommendations so far in average from all of the UN state bodies to the other UN state bodies across Asia. But sadly, the facts are that the majority of these recommendations either have not been implemented at all, or have been partially implemented, or the recommendations is just only received but not supported. These are the two different conditions in terms of UPR. In fact, as I state here in my presentation, is that several things just went really downhill during the pandemic when the COVID-19 struck. Like for example, the number of torture cases as well as not only torture, but also death tolls have been significantly increasing in custody, in prison cells. And this can be seen throughout several countries, for example, Malaysia, again, India, a lot of South Asia countries, and etc. And also, the facts is there, when it is stated before in the recommendation, torture happened when there is a chain of impunity. So the recommendation stated that there should be an ending chain of this impunity of torture. But the fact is that this chain of this chain of impunity doesn't seem to stop, and didn't stop during the specific limit of time, the 2017 until 2021. It just flows and kept increasing, kept contributing number of cases from year to year by several perpetrators. And it is highlighted in the second point here below that several cases in Asia highlighted that the main perpetrator here lies on the security forces and states to be the direct perpetrators of torture. For example, here I highlighted several cases within the countries in Asia. There have been more increasing number of security forces in Papua, but Indonesia, Papua. But the sad thing is that there has been ton of critiques that there should be a stop, or a decreasing number should be of sending these security officers to Papua, because they have been implementing torture, they have been neglecting the sense of human rights in Papua, and etc., because they have been contributing in a number of cases of extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrest, and etc. But in fact, here is that the state kept on multiplying the number of security officers in Papua. So it is highlighted that Papua here is in a big scape of trouble, because torture cases kept increasing there, as voices there are not really heard, or not really placed as a priority here, as in human rights in Indonesia, sadly. And second of all, also police brutality, extrajudicial killing also throughout of security officers or police officers that is named as border security forces in Bangladesh and India, because we know that geographically Bangladesh and India have been it's just a cross. It's just a matter of maybe minutes, or just a matter of door to door sense that they are complementing each other. But here, in order to secure these two areas, there are planted several border security forces there. Or to be completely, or to be put simply, that border security forces, or BSF, is actually a police officer, but guards the border lines between Bangladesh and India. But here, during 2017 and 2021, I have sought throughout reports from the CSOs across India and Bangladesh, the number of torture actually lies on these agents who are supposed to be protecting these border lines. Like, for example, in 2021, there has been a serious cases of when children are supposed to be going across the fence to do their job, actually legally a job, but they have been tortured by these border security forces, because they have been alleged to maybe stole something, or maybe they just want to, they have become a threat to another country, and etc. But these allegations then turn into torture, not of forms of protecting several areas within those borderlines. These are several examples. And last but not least, also extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. Maybe I don't really have to highlight this, because if you want to maybe Google out through several new portals, extrajudicial killing in the Philippines, the main perpetrator lies on the state itself by implementing an obligation to end narcotics, drugs, and etc. The war on drugs theme, the war on drugs obligation. But the fact is that maybe just maybe this law, when it is passed, should be a law that is used to decrease the number of the users of narcotics and then drugs. But to some extent, this power, this obligation is used as a power to do torture towards these people. So that is why it is highlighted here. It is an extrajudicial killing in the Philippines. And the third point is that sadly, no safeguards have been put into place. Like I have stated before here, in the recommendation, several states of the member states of UN have been recommending that these specific states across Asia have to ratify, not only supporting but also to ratify the optional protocol, or if they haven't been actually implementing the CAT, they have to ratify it. Or if these two steps are done, they have to implement the NPM, or the National Preventive Mechanism, but it has not been done. So that is why this is one of the examples why torture kept happening, and in fact contributing to a serious number of cases there, because there have been no safeguard put on into place. There are no proceedings, there are no follow-ups on the ratification of OPCAT and also the CAT itself. And there have been no follow-ups regarding these countries who have been ratifying, but have not been following up the NPMs, or the National Preventive Mechanism system. So these are the three main facts that have been happening across Asia, not only Indonesia, not only India, not only Malaysia, but the entire cases of happening within the region of Asia. And not to mention, the silencing of HRDs have been also increasingly happening within this region. Not only in Indonesia, not only in Malaysia, and etc., but across the Asia. Maybe regarding this case, it can be more explained by Mr. Anton from SafeNet later on. But maybe just to brief a bit regarding this, we can see here that from my previous explanation that several cases of torture have been happening quite frequent, not really quite, but very frequent in Asia. And these couple of people called the HRDs, or the human rights defenders, have been defending what should be the rights should be protected. These rights should be protected, what we call human rights should be protected. But instead, when they try to call out either the security officer or the state itself, they have been put up into a serious case called the criminalization against HRDs. Or they have been trapped into this law called the defamation law. Like, for example, here on the left, we have Haris Azhar and Fatia Maulidianti. These are the two, we can say these are the two top human rights defenders in Indonesia. And in 2021, they have been stating in their podcast that the government have been seriously obliged, or doing cases or doing several things that have been not really supporting human rights, but actually doing something that is completely different from human rights. But instead of seeing this as a critique, they were then named as suspects for defamation case. And second, here we can see from the left, it is not only this is not only targeted to personal, but there is also a certain pattern here that the attacks or the criminalization could go from the personal or from the individual itself to an organization, to a CSO. For example, here on my right here, we have in 2013, that was maybe 9 years ago from now, there has been an arrest of the ODCAR, or a human rights CSO in Bangladesh director, where ODCAR and the director here have been not only criticize the state that there has been a serious tons of cases of torture, extrajudicial killing, and other stuff, but they have been also documenting these events to put up to be a legal documentation, to be a legal proof to the state and also the other countries, especially in a global scope. But sadly, this turns into end quote and quote unquote treason or a defamation to the state itself. So this is why ODCAR's director Adilur is put into a persecution of prominent human rights organization. So and it is only a matter of not only but 9 years later, just 1 month ago, ODCAR was threatened to be shut down by the government because they have kept on documenting human rights violation cases, torture cases, or there have been a serious cases of other things that have been violating a huge amount of human rights issues and etc. So the pattern here is that the pioneer of the human rights defender has been caught up first, and then the pattern lies on how this organization should be shut down because they have kept on documenting and reporting the series of cases to the upper ups or the UN bodies and etc. So it is actually quite unfortunate that these people we call HRDs, whether it is individual or organizations, have been trying to voice out that torture is real in their state and torture just kept happening in their state. But instead of seeing this as a critique by the state or other agents from the country, from the state, this is seen as, again, as a treason, as a case where these people are trying to make the public image of this country bad and etc. So not only torture happens to a series of people, a specific groups, marginalized groups, and etc., but to also those who have been protecting and in order to defend these series of people, these series of groups of people. And now it is lies on the new risks of torture because we haven't been again implementing these recommendations from the UPR. Thus, new forms of torture have been born and have been causing not only physical, but also psychological effects to it. For example, we have seen Indonesia and other states across Asia have been using the form of word cyber torture, which we can see that there has been a cyber surveillance that has the potential to increase the number of defamation and etc. And then we have also doxing, we have also hacking, we have also an internet shutdown. We can see as one of the examples from Papua, Indonesia, where I forgot the series of time, but back in 2021, Papua has this current state of their internet to be shut down because the government is afraid that there will be a series of hoax or just false news that will sort of giving false information to them, and this also strikes out their democracy lines. So also here we can also see that the new files of torture have been coming nonstop, while not only the new ones, but also the several ones that have not found its solution kept on coming as well. So we can see here that torture not only have been frequently happening, but it also kept popping up when other series of torture cases haven't found its solution yet. So here at my end of presentation, I put just two recommendations, two things that should be strictly implemented by the states. The first is that all states to create prompt safeguards, because these safeguards can be one of the keys, one of the main keys to end the chain of impunity of torture cases, and also to strengthen the law that the states have at the moment to strengthen the human rights inside their country. And second of all is that we have to gather all forces of CSOs in order for solidarity to end torture itself, because we support a government, we support the state who wants to end torture. So here, if we try to come up together a solidarity to give a critique, a supportive critique to the government as well as the states to end torture, we believe that these two recommendations will go out well and will turn out to be a good outcome to all states that have been frequently chased out by torture cases. So I think that is all. I will stop my presentation for now because I think Mr. Anton has also a presentation regarding how is torture elevating and how is that human rights defender, news broadcasts and news portals, media can be a greater power for us to not only support or um, to not only share the ideas of torture, the awareness of torture, but could also have the potential to end torture as well. So I think that is all the presentation from me. Thank you so much. And back to you, Amisha.
Thank you so much, Nadine, for your such a thought-provoking presentation. So, based on your presentation, what stuck with me is when you said that the chain of impunity is what is directly contributing to the incidents of torture, right? And the state agents are the ones who are mostly involved in it. So while you were presenting, I had this question in my mind that from the first cycle to the third, has there been any recommendations that's been repeated again and again, and yet the state has not acted upon it? Because based on our experience in Nepal, we have like tons of such recommendations made by states during our UPR's cycle, and then these recommendations are not implemented, right? So I feel like this repetition somehow unwilling, and they're also reluctant to towards the protection and promotion of human rights, and this could be one of the reasons how the states are continuously contributing to this whole chain of impunity. So so when you touch the part that states' unwillingness is something that is one of the major factor that that's causing this implementation barrier. Uh, I would also want to know from Anton that how can a civil society step in this context, and how can they what role they can play in order to bridge this lapses and to mount pressure on the state to overcome this non-execution of recommendations, along with the fact that also I'm also curious to know that whether the silencing of human rights defenders that you rightly pointed out, Nadine, in your presentation happens during the review stage, as I understand that while in the UPR's review stage, the civil societies submit the shadow report, right? So is it during the review stage, or is it after the whole review stage, all these things? So maybe, Anton, we would like to know more from you in this regard.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Nadine, also for inviting me to speak this evening for this webinar. I'm glad that I can be here and share our experience from SafeNet regarding the cyber torture. As an introduction, I'm Anton. Amisha already introducing me. I'm secretary of SafeNet, Southeast Asia Freedom of Expression Network. We are based in Bali, Indonesia, but sometimes also working a bit in the area of mostly in Southeast Asia, including like in Myanmar, in the region. regarding the UPR, actually, SafeNet was involved in the submission for the UPR with the contrast for the issue of right to dissent. It was collaborative work with between SafeNet and contrast, and SafeNet's member was quite focused on cyber torture, or we can say cyber torture, or broader context is about the digital right violation in Indonesia. And I would like to speak more about how it's digital right violation and also cyber torture happen in Indonesian context. Of course, I will speak in Indonesian context, but I believe that similar thing also happening in the region or even in the global context at the current moment. I would like to share my screen. Okay, so this is the situation that we have. Of course, we can see that digital activism is rising everywhere. A lot of NGO, civil society, activists, journalists, etc., using digital tool as part of their activism. But in another hand, we can see that the repression is become more and more also. And that's why we think that the digital right issue is very important for us to be more get attention. In SafeNet or in Indonesia in general, we can say that digital right is at least consists of three things, which are access to internet, and then freedom of expression, and right to feel safe or secure in the internet. But we can see that it's happened everywhere, that we have a lot of digital rights violation in the region, such as internet shutdown that Nadine already mentioned. It happens a lot of internet shutdown in I think it's not just in Indonesia, but also it's like in India, what we know, and also of course in Myanmar, where a lot of internet shutdown happened during the repression after the military occupy the country and the states. And that's happened also in Indonesia during certain moment, like in Papua. There was internet shutdown. Sometimes it's for technical reason, but we believe that it's happening also due to the political reasons. And also digital repression, we can see that there are a lot of more and more defamation using internet law in Indonesia. And after that, also we can see that digital attack also happening a lot in Indonesia. And how it's happened. We can say that the digital attack was happened in two types of digital attack: hard attack and soft attacks. Hard attack is mostly like technical attacks, so they're using more sophisticated technology, and it's more dangerous because we don't know about how it already conducted against us. It's not like a soft attack where the perpetrator also already they already show to us they want to be recognized they are doing the attacks to us, and also it's happened with the political motive, not just by the economical motive when we get attacked for hard attack. And then the digital attack also, if they're using soft attacks, mostly it's targeted for certain people or certain community like journalists, activists, etc. This the example of hard attack that been happen in Indonesia, mostly hacking. Activists or journalists or human rights defender, they get attacked by taking over their digital asset been taken over by the perpetrators. We don't know who are they, but we believe it's related with the state actor. And also we get phishing, we get intercepting, and also of course those attack mostly with the to our website. This is one of the example. I think this is everywhere in a lot of country already. That's not just in Indonesia. That's the state actor, they doing the illegal surveillance and using Pegasus, created by NSO group of Israel. And this big issue last year, and the victim mostly the activists and journalists from the Middle East. But we believe also that it's not just in the Middle East, but also in some area in Southeast Asia or Asia in general. This is how illegal surveillance is happening using the sophisticated technology. But also the cyber torture also happening using a lot of different methods. It's including doxing, where the activists or journalists, they get attacked because their identity been revealed without their consent. And also we get another type of attack was using trolling, where the activists or the target, they've been attacked using a lot of negative comment about their activity. And also we can see that the defamation or suing activists or human rights defenders is getting rising, as Nadine also already mentioned. It's happened to some of prominent activists in Indonesia, from Indonesian Corruption Watch, from Kontras, and also from different organizations. And why it's dangerous, because person who sue them or criminalize those activists are the public officer. It's a very high level officer in Indonesia, and they should not criminalize, criticize or the opinion or the expression of the activists, but it's happened already in Indonesia. And it's increasing, not just in the national level, but also in the local level. We can see also that the online mob is getting rising, where the like the bot, the anonymous account, and also the pseudonym, they are hiding behind the anonymity, but sometimes they make fake news. They creating very targeted attack to the certain journalists or activists, certain human rights defenders, so they can attack softly, meaning that they don't need to own the technology. They need to own the device of the target, but only using the comment and then the fake news, the certain link where it can be used to attack us as a human rights defenders. And this in Indonesia context, we can see that most of the victims are activists. They are the highest number of victims. And also we can see that CSO or civil society organization also among those are become the victim of this digital attack or digital torture, we can say. Another situation that we face is that this kind of attack mostly happen during the controversial issue in the national level. So when we have certain issue that become controversial, and then activists, human rights defenders, they are criticizing that issue, the policy, for example, then the attack will be getting rise. The number will be suddenly increasing. So that's one of the basic assumption that the attack was political motive attack. And also not just the digital attack, we also have some controversial regulation in Indonesia. We identified, at least we have 5. Number one is defamation articles. so we can be criminalized when we express something that people thinks that the expression is not make some certain people not happy, then they will show you using this articles. And also hate speech article is quite not really clear, the guideline of the hate speech. Sometimes because you say criticize certain people or certain policy, then it become hate speech. Then you will be sued using this article. And also blasphemy article is since a long time ago that we want to change this article, but it's still used to criminalize the activists, the human rights defender in Indonesia. And also fake news article. I think it's not just in Indonesia, but also in Singapore, in Malaysia, and also in Cambodia, I believe, where people been criminalized because they share some news or article from the website or from the internet, but the state will say that that is fake news, and then they will sue you. And the last regulations, I think this is not the last also, but maybe we can find another one also. But what we find so far is that treason article also the problematic regulation that been used to repress the activists in Indonesia. And this is some of our recommendation regarding the situation of particularly in the context of digital rights, that the state should ensure that existing legal and constitutional provision protecting our freedom of expression rights, it should be implemented, because actually we have some of that existing legal and constitutional protection mechanism, but it's not really well used, we believe, in Indonesia. And also we recommend the state to amend problematic articles of IT law or Internet and Transaction Electronic Law in Indonesia. At least there are 3 articles that been very problematic, and that's why we civil society in Indonesia demanding since long time ago, since I think like 5 years ago, that the state should change that problematic articles. And also we have some other articles, including the revise of internet law itself in Indonesia. So we hope that we can have more legal basic to protect our freedom of expression, freedom right to feel safe when we do online activity or our activism as a human rights defender. I think that's end of my presentation. Thanks for time that give to me. I will floor is yours, Amisa.
Thank you so much, Anton, for highlighting the after effects of UPR recommendation if they are not implemented at national level. So I noticed that we have a question from our colleague Anna. She's asked us about, are there any recommendation regarding digital rights violations and cyber torture in UPR review cycles? And and building on to that question, I also have a question to you, Anton, that if there are any recommendations as such on cyber torture and digital security by any other states to Indonesia, then what do you think that the other states' responsibility would be in terms of following up those recommendations? How would do you think it is necessary for those states recommending to follow up whether the recommendations are implemented or unimplemented? And also, Nadine can also add to it after Anton. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that your question is similar. Frey and Anna and Amisa is regarding mostly about the digital rights violation. For the recommendation, as I already mentioned some of the recommendations, I think the biggest issue in the moment in Indonesia is about the internet law, because it's been used a lot for silencing the activists, even the media, the human rights defenders in general. Mostly at least three articles. It's 27, 28, and 29. It's about the wait a minute. It's about the defamation articles. It's about the hate speech, and also it's about fake news. I think it's, like the Nadine already mentioned, the case happened to Fatia and Haris Azhar was about fake news, because the minister, the coordinators of minister, they say that the research it's not correct and it's a fake news. That's why he sued the activists. But Nadine can share more about this. And regarding the question from Amisa about the state responsibility, I think since it's become issue among the country in the region, or not just in the region, I believe it's happened in the globally. That's digital right violation is become more and more normalized by the states. So that's why we see, as a civil society, we should stand that and saying that this is not something right. We should against that kind of digital right violation, including like the internet shutdown, because it's become more and more often happening. We can see that in Myanmar when the military already occupy the country. The first thing that they do is blocking the access to the internet. And also that's happening in Kashmir, in India for long, I think it's more than 2 years already happening there. And also in Nigeria, I don't know in the Nepal context, but from a little bit finding some information, I think it's also more or less is happening also in that area. So that was really important that for every country they taking this in account, and then they should speak about digital rights violation is become a mainstream issue as well. Back to you, Anissa.
Maybe I can add up several things from Mr. Anton. I think it's a complete set of information from Mr. Anton itself, but maybe I would like to highlight several recommendations that was given to Indonesia specifically, but it's not really much different with other states within Asia. So regarding torture itself, first of all, we have, if I'm not mistaken, five recommendations in the third cycle, but it's not also not really much different from the previous cycles. Is that first, we really have to Indonesia really have to ratify the optional protocol, because it has its certain mechanisms, more specific mechanisms in order to prevent torture, and also to take measures of ending torture. And other three recommendations, just to put and highlight on how police officers or police forces have been doing torture to civil society individually or as an organization. Now, this links to several other UPR recommendations. Like, for example, Indonesia have been writing for the freedom of press, and then the freedom to rights to dissent, and then human rights defenders, and many more, which underlines the importance of us being able to express the facts that torture kept happening. Because in the previous recommendations given, that Indonesia has been doing through its security officers have been doing or implementing torture, and that's why I have been mentioning also in my presentation, these people. I forgot to mention journalists also, not only human rights defenders as an activists or human rights activists like in Contras, and many other CSOs, but also those who have been writing and voicing out through their writings, such as journalists, have been criminalized by also the state because they have been stating these reports of torture. So I also forgot the specific keywords to it, but if I'm not mistaken, in one of the recommendations of freedom of press is that the state really has to ensure the freedom of speech to civil society organizations, as well as journalists, as well as activists, and many more. But sadly, these have not been adopted well because first, they have not been implementing to end torture, and second, they have not been implementing the protection to these people who have not only to protecting but also to defending torture in Indonesia, the human rights activists. So these recommendations may be to put out into digital attacks and etc. is I can briefly say that it is a form of neglection to these series of recommendations to ensure the freedom of press, to ensure the freedom of expression, even to right to dissent, where I have also been writing with Mr. Honorable Anton here. So these recommendations have been only been supported but have been neglected for the past few years of the due implementation dates. So maybe this has been our main concern also on how do we actually end digital rights when the state itself is neglecting these series of recommendations to end digital attacks, as well as the criminalization towards the people working digitally to protect human rights, even in offline groups, such as the activists that have been going on to fields to not only documenting but also reporting the series of human rights violation cases and etc. So this has also been our main concern and questions for me and Mr. Anton. So back to you, Amisha.
So thank you, Nadine, for like clarifying the whole situation. I have a follow-up question to both of you. Like, since we know that these UPR recommendations are not legally binding, right? So is this the reason why they are not? They've been neglected by the state, and whenever like they neglect this, the state neglects it for a certain period of time, and whenever they have a new cycle, and they have to appear before the international forum, international community, they just try to try to throw dust in the eyes of the international community by saying something, just paying lip services to the commitment. Is it so? Like, what do you like? Do you have any Yeah.
Okay, maybe I could go first, Mr. Anton, and then you will continue and complete more of my speech. So, the question, is it because it's not legally binding that it is not partially or implemented by the state? Well, I cannot strictly say that it is because it's not legally binding, because it will be a boomerang effect if I said that it's legally binding. Because one of the concrete example, Indonesia has been ratifying, had ratified the UNCAT in 1986, if I'm not mistaken, because we already have the law to ratifying these CAT. So if it is already ratified, it can be said that it is legally binding. But the fact is that we have been ratifying not only a region, but a global scope of international law, but it is still not implemented. It is still not being protected. When they have been security officers who are doing this series of torture issues, it is not being strengthened. It is not being criticized. It is not being again seen through as a priority to be fixed by the state. So I don't think that UPR not legally binding is one of the things that why it is not implemented. Because when we already have been implementing several other global international laws, it is still not being implemented up till today. For example, also we have been ratifying the CEDAW, the CEDAW, which has been ratified on how the state should protect the rights of women and also children and preventing them towards torture acts, harassments, and etc. But this is actually interesting facts that these laws to prevent torture to these people have only been implemented and have only been ratified this year. So it has been 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, by the National Committee of Protection of Women in Indonesia to ratify this, to implement this. So if the legal binding systems have not been implemented and have not been looked through well by Indonesia, then what is the current condition, or the question lies on what about those who are not legally binding? So yeah, I think that is my answer for now. Maybe Mr. Anton could add some of my data or some of my information that I lacked earlier.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks, Nadine. First of all, I don't have so much knowledge about the international policy and regulation. I have to admit that. So I'm not the expert on that issue. But based on my own reflection regarding the regulation in Indonesia, we already have some, I can say, good regulation actually, such as protecting the freedom of expression, protecting the freedom of press. When we talk in the region context, I think we are quite good compared to certain different country in the region. But the challenge is when in the implementation, because when we need to implement that policy, that regulation, it's become more and more challenge in Indonesia. I believe it's related with the bureaucracy. It's about the we have I think Indonesia was one of the most complicated administrative thing in the world, because we have such a lot of structure when we come to the implementation of the regulation. I give you one of the example regarding the internet law. Actually, there is a joint agreement or joint commitment between three bodies in Indonesia, ministry in Indonesia, that's people cannot be criminalized using internet law by other people who not been criticized. So, for example, I cannot sue some people or criminalize people when they criticize Nadine. It should be Nadine itself who sue them. But in fact, it happens a lot of in Indonesia that sometimes even it's not people who've been criticized, they can sue you. They can sue you using that internet law. That's why there is a joint agreement between three ministries that people cannot just sue another person because they're not feeling good with the critics. But in fact, it's still happening. Even we already have that kind of joint agreement, that's something good actually, but people still can just sue another person when you feel that's not feel comfortable with what they say about different people. So that's something that's very weird, I can say, in Indonesia, but that's happened. I think that's some of more information about giving you more context about how it's been more complicated than when we talk about the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton. So coming back to both of your points, when you mentioned that the challenge is in the implementation, right? So is it possible for like how open is the government, the bureaucracy towards establishing a mechanism alongside civil society, right, in order to accelerate the the recommendations and its implementation? Is it possible, or if the society, again, the government is a bit rigid? And but as far as I understand, the government is rigid, but then do you even see the scope of it? It's just my curiosity. Yeah.
Okay, this is a very tricky question. I don't know how will Mr. Anton react to this. But in my personal honesty, I see that there will be a possibility that there will be several ratifications if what I have been mentioning also in my recommendations during my presentation, that there will be a lot of solidarity gathering up to push the government. Because I can see the scope or the loophole is that from one of the examples that has been happening recently, for the ratification of laws to prevent torture, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and etc. against women. So here is one of the main best practices where not only CSOs but several government agents come together to support these several laws. Even though it has been 10 years after the promise to ratify and implement this law, but I can see that the efforts have been made to be a good outcome. Because in 2022, I saw that there is a main increasingly events of violence against women cases or violence against gender-based cases during this series of years. And strangely, during the period of the third cycle UPR, these laws have been not being placed in a priority. But because CSOs, but in priority or basically woman empowering based CSOs have been fighting and have been campaigning, have been going to call to action campaigns to the civil society, as well as giving press releases, fact findings to the government. We can see that in 2022 the law finally passed. So I still believe that there is a scope of hope, a ray of sunshine to maybe the government to ratify for example, the optional protocol for Convention Against Torture, Convention Against Torture, because we have, if we can put it as an analogy as a game, we have passed stage 1, which is the UNCAT, the Convention Against Torture. But now we are still in the level, or still on the way to a complete level 2, which is a broader, not a broader, but a more specific mechanism to end or to prevent torture, the OPCAT. So I think that this best practice that have been implemented to the law I have mentioned before can be used for this OPCAT. So yeah, that's just my personal, honest, and hopeful opinion. Maybe Mr. Anton has a more concrete best practice example for this question. Thank you.
Yeah, this related with the how we can collaborate between CSO and the government. No? I think so. First, advocacy work is very long process. I think we cannot just finish that like capacity building is. I think is much more easier than advocacy work, because when you do the capacity building, you only need like training and then monitoring for the beneficiaries. But when we talk with when we're talking about the advocacy work, it's much more complicated, I believe, because there's a lot of actors that you should be involved with them, and it's very dynamic process, as well as same as a politic itself. It's depend on the leaders, depend on the political context, So depend on their willingness, the situation that press them to respond to our works. So I think that's for the collaborative work or the partnership between the government and the CSO is very very challenging process, and it's also very contextual process. I mean, for certain issue we can work together with them collaboratively, but for a different issue maybe we can like cat and mouse. We are a very different position, but again, for the certain issue we can collaborate with them, and for the different issue maybe we can fight with them. It's also depend on the local context sometimes. I mean, when we talk about Jakarta as a center, sometimes it's different when we talk about Bali as a local. So it's very a dynamic process for as a conclusion. Thanks, Amisa.
Yeah, and again, like I feel like I have a lot of questions hearing you both and the context. Another is that I feel like, do you think that if when the recommendations are made, if the country making the recommendation to state under review comes up with a time frame, right, like you have to implement these recommendations on certain time, like would it be helpful for the country to implement it, or like would it again be the same, that country neglecting constantly the recommendations that's made to it?
Mr. Anton, would you like to go first?
I think when we talk from the optimist perspective, I think that's still good point that your government is accept the recommendation and then they have a certain time frame. That's good things. At least their willingness, rather than just neglecting your recommendation, resist that, rejecting your idea. Then I think that's even the willingness they don't have. Then we have less hope for that. So I believe that's even though it's very challenging to implement it, it's still good when your government they accept your recommendation and then they have time frames, because then we can ask them, remind them when, let's say like a year or 2 years after the UPR been submitted, because they have commitment already. I hope that's answer. Please, Nadine.
Okay, I actually agree with Mr. Anton, but maybe to put as another perspective, we can see that we also have to realize the concept of national interest. So based on maybe what we see as CSOs, as activists, as journalists, as collaborative movements, we have also our own interest in order to prevent torture, to prevent criminalization. And these sometimes I see that is not aligned with the government because they have also their national interest. Like, for example, in Indonesia, we have this thing called the National Midterm Development Plan. So, or Mr. Anton, we call it RPJMN. Here, we see that this national plan is sought out to develop several things in Indonesia, such as the development for youth, development for several things that can be a main place for a good economic development, and several other places and other several issues. Or for example, the increasing amount of facilities for education, health, and etc. But it can't be aligned with us if the government itself does not have a national interest to prevent torture. So I think it will be difficult for us to answer when will be the time frame for us, the government, to end torture. When will be the perfect time to ratify, the process of ratifying, the implementation after ratifying OPCAT, for example, or maybe after that, the NPM, the National Preventive Mechanism. This will be a hard question to be left in mind because, again, we're not in the same server. We're not in the same wavelength as the government. So this will be a more different answer if the government, for instance, have put a priority to strengthen human rights, especially towards victims of torture, towards those who have been criminalized during the internet laws that have been mentioned several times by Mr. Anton, then we have the same wavelength. Then we can say that, okay, maybe we can have a cup of tea together with the government and settle things out by maybe creating or crafting a timeline. When should be the good date or day or year or month to end the series of tortures? So if these has the same wavelength, then we can do that. But here we see that the best experience is that the government is neglecting UPR. So I think that's the best thing that we can come up with. Will the government have a time frame to settle this, to settle all of this, especially OPCAT and other laws, regional or maybe international laws regarding human rights and torture issues? So I think that's my answer. Thank you, Amisha.
Thank you, Nadine. So, do you still see the role of international community in this context? Like, if the government is reluctant and then is not willing to comply by the time frame, so how could international community intervene? I mean, in pressurizing the government to be accountable to its towards its commitments. Any thoughts, observations on it?
Okay. This might be a good self-reflection for us, Mr. Anton. But if I might want to answer a bit regarding this, maybe the perfect word to put is not intervene, or intervention, but actually recommending, because we see that we have a jurisdiction. Every state has a jurisdiction to be protected and to be realized by other states or maybe an international entity. So I think what should the international entity do, or maybe the international CSO do here, is to give a never-ending recommendations. For example, we have this international mechanism called the urgent appeal. So we as the CSOs have the right to report maybe if there is a human rights violation that has been an ongoing pattern in Indonesia, but the cherry on top lies on one case, then we can give the urgent appeal to the special reporter on torture. Or if it affects on the extrajudicial killing, then we can give it to the special reporter of extrajudicial killing. Then from these international entities, like for example, I've mentioned before the SRs, or maybe the OHCHR themselves, or maybe international bodies that came from a national entity, can just recommend the state or the government of Indonesia to maybe implement and to strengthen the law of etc., or maybe to completely ratify the law of etc., but not really completely intervene. So I think I get the sense of why we should not intervene completely, but the question lies on the recommendations itself, whether it is being seen through or not. So maybe Mr. Anton, you would like to add more to this question?
Regarding the international pressure, I think our government in Indonesia, they are more scared to internet user pressure. So it's really, social media pressure is really something for Indonesian government in the moment. So when we have pressure in using the hashtag, using the internet user, then they will giving you more attention. That's from some cases, but it's not for the policy of course. But for certain issue, they are really aware about that. Just my answer. Thanks.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Like, since we are about to reach our designated time to end this webinar, like I want to know if you have any final observations or concluding comments, remarks. Like, yeah, the floor is yours. Like, please proceed.
Okay, maybe I will leave Mr. Anton first.
Okay, I will close my session with just a bit general comments that, of course, the challenge it will become more and more increase. I believe so. That's the operation, the reparations using the technology will become more and more sophisticated, but we don't have any choice. The choice only that we have to face that and we have to deal with that, and that's why it's very important for us as civil society also to increase our knowledge, our capacity regarding the technology, understanding the technology, how we can deal with the operation with the digital torture that's currently happening everywhere. And I think that's the only choice that we have, and I will invite all of us to always just keep aware and then improve ourselves. Thanks.
Okay, well, that's a very motivational closing remarks from Mr. Anton. Well, maybe a couple of things that I could put into my closing remarks is that we now know that UPR recommendations have been put up by not only us, the CSOs from the national states, or the CSOs within the states, or the journalists within the states, but it was actually given by the international entity, whether it is personally from just one state or from the international body itself. So I would like to maybe place my hopes that this is a cue, this is a hint for the government of Indonesia to getting more realized that torture is happening within this country, and not only in Indonesia but also in Asia. Torture is frequently happening within your shoes, below your shoes. So it happened across the border, not only long after the border, or maybe it happened within the suburbans, the urbans. So it happens everywhere and also every day. So my only hope is that the government should realize this and should put this not only to put the priority on the facilities and tall buildings and economic developments, but to also put these people who have been fighting themselves to fight torture and helping them to getting more priority to be protected in their own country, because who will be the main person to prioritize their safety if it's not from the government itself? Because the CSOs here are only trying to help these people to get them more attentive, to get them more realize, more attention to the government that, hey, these people are suffering. So the main person to do this right job to protect torture, extrajudicial killing, and other issues is the government itself. So I place my bets and hopes in that. Thank you, Amisha.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Oh, sorry. I think we have a question here. Oh no, it's the correct. Yeah. So after this discussion, I'm very much hopeful that with our concerted efforts and collaboration at national and regional levels, we can make the difference. We can make the concerned authorities execute their national and international commitments. And I also think that today's discussion was pivotal in laying a foundation for further discussions on the issue, especially on the implementation aspect and how we can on the after effects of UPR and its non-implementation. With this, I would like to wrap up the webinar for today. Thank you all the participants for joining in, even if it was a Saturday, it was a weekend. Thank you for being with us and taking part in this webinar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank
Thank you
you
so
all.
much. Goodbye.
Have a nice, great weekend then.